Forget gurus. Forget anyone claiming to be an online business expert without going through the challenges of entrepreneurship themselves. The Real Money, Real Business podcast is here to prove the best insights in online business comes from your fellow online business builders. We dig into stories of entrepreneurs selling their business on the Empire Flippers marketplace so that you can learn how they made their business profitable, how they overcame obstacles, and what lessons they learned in their online journey. If you want to take your business and your knowledge to the next level, you've come to the right podcast. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Real Money, Real Business podcast. I'm Michelle, and today we have Joe on the show who's selling an Amazon FBA business on the Empire Flippers marketplace. Hey Joe, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hey, good morning everybody. I'm doing well.
Well, thanks for making time to come on today. I'm looking forward to learning more about your business, but before we dive in, let's go over a brief summary of it. It's an Amazon FBA business in the tobacco products niche created in September of 2015. The average revenue for the business is $81,824 per month, and it makes an average of $23,816 per month in net profit. Included in the sale is an Amazon Seller Central account with 79 SKUs, a primary branded domain that redirects to the Amazon storefront, 2 additional domains that are inactive, trademarks, and we have 2 in Mexico, 1 in the UK, and 1 in the US, an email list, employee contracts and relationships, and supplier contracts and relationships. For everyone listening, you can visit empireflippers.com/marketplace and search for listing 57427 to learn more about this business. Or you can unlock this listing to start your due diligence if you're interested in purchasing this asset. So Joe, now let's hear from you. You've had this business for 6 years, and you've built it up into a pretty substantial source of income. So what can you tell us about your background in building and running an online business?
I come from rural Michigan. When I grew up, you're supposed to go to school, get a good job, work for the man, and at the end of the day, plug into society and do what you were supposed to do. So I started out that way. I started out doing, odd jobs. Originally, it was retail throughout college. And when I got out of college, I was still in sales. I had a unique opportunity to work for a Japanese automotive company. And I worked there. I started from the bottom and basically learned everything I could about plastic injection molding and about tool and die and a lot of things that I had no concept of from a production standpoint. And I learned a lot about supply chain there. And so I was very committed to find a place and work there for the rest of my life, which is kind of a rarity, especially in today's, economy. So I started out there, had no concept, no inkling to go online, no idea to move to that space. About midway through my journey with that company that's based out of Michigan, I had an opportunity to do my astronaut job. My astronaut job, astronaut job meaning hey, when I grow up, I'm going to be an astronaut without any inkling of, how do I get there? What, what are all the steps, what's required to get there? It was to basically build video games. And so there was a company that was based out of Kalamazoo, Michigan. It was called S2 Games. We built Heroes of New Earth, and I've had an opportunity to work there, so I jumped at it. And at that point in time, I met my friend John, and we were responsible for regional operations, which was essentially managing the business online, making money. So that was my first introduction to really any sort of online economy, any sort of making money online, anything like that. I think at that point we were doing quite a bit of money in Southeast Asia, and we were responsible, being up all night, running patches. It was probably one of the best and most hectic times of my life. So I did that for about a year. Our company got sold out by the company to our partners in Southeast Asia. And so we stayed on for about a year managing that business. And so that was my first segue into online commercialization. After that, I ended up going back to a traditional business. I wanted to run a car cleaning company, a detail shop. I had done that when I was a kid with my parents. So I kind of dove into that. And my friend John continued on. He was like, I want to find a way to make money online. I remember having this conversation distinctly. I want to find a way to make money online. I was like, okay, man, well, good luck with that. So after about 6 months, he comes back to me and he's like, hey, so I have this crazy idea. I think we get some products. We can buy them from China, we can import them, and then we're going to sell them on Amazon. And I was like, dude, I have no idea what the hell you're talking about, but it sounds interesting. So how do we get into this? And so long story short, John and I both started with about $500 in pocket, just 2 kids from the middle of nowhere in Michigan. And we started to explore what does it actually take to import products? What does it take to build an online presence? What does it take to build branding? I mean, we had all this experience from working at S2 games on a AAA video game title, to make sure that everything was in line. But this was a very different adventure. Like we came into this to kind of build it up from the ground up, in our likeness, not somebody else's. So,
and you guys got started pretty early on in this sort of FBA revolution. So you didn't have the benefit of these gurus who are, online teaching people how to do this.
yeah, this was pre-guru. So like we didn't even, like we started, you just figured stuff out. Like we figured out how to kind of, I wouldn't say game the system, but we figured out how to navigate the seller support system. We knew people on a first name basis because like for us, it was out of necessity. So like we were around before a lot of these groups popped up, like back then everybody was doing drop shipping. Everybody and their mom had a drop shipping course, and, it wasn't like FBA wasn't the powerhouse that it would become. This is before like Boost with FBA in New York City that I went to in 2017. Like this was way back, like there were some people on YouTube doing their thing, but like it wasn't the thing that it is today. Like there wasn't MDS, there wasn't, there weren't any masterminds when we got started. So it was just kind of like trial and error. And so we started doing retail arbitrage at first, buying products and then just flipping it. And then eventually got enough money up to start to buy our own brands and just kept expanding. The whole like idea was to, find some products that made some money. And this was just going to supplement our income. We never had any idea that like this was going to completely like remove us from the workforce and give us opportunities, to travel and to see different countries or any of this stuff. It was just like, hey man, I just need to sell one a day. That was the starting point. Eventually it was like one product, and then it became 7, and then 35, and then it was 150, so like for my friend's business. And then we were basically just trying to find a product that did $10 to $20 a profit a day, and then do that 50 to 100 times. I wasn't trying to conquer the world. I wasn't trying to do anything crazy. It was just start small, learn as much as you can. And doing retail arbitrage was a huge help to that because it forced you to learn the system, but not really on your dime. Like I could figure out how to list things, like there was a lot of like not necessary introductory stuff that I didn't have to take a course. I just kind of stumbled my way through it with someone else's products. And then eventually when I got my own, it was like, oh, okay, I know how to list this. I know I would do this differently, or, I would change this copy here, do this image, or, that type of stuff.
So what made you come up with the idea to start this business specifically with these products?
A lot of like John is a very key character in this story because he kind of, I owe this guy my life basically. For what I have right now, I owe him everything. So we worked together. We were a team. He was always the idea guy. I was always the execution guy. And so like I helped him build up his business, and in the interim, like while working with him and while providing support and, giving him some ideas or trying to help him work through things, because again, there was no support mechanism, especially in the town that we were living, Kalamazoo. There's tech, but it's not, California. It's not a lot of these different areas. Like we were basically two guys doing the same thing, and it just kind of clicked. He came to me with the idea and he said, hey, I did some research. Here's some products that we were looking at, and this is how we should execute. And I looked at it and was like, okay, so like, well, let's try it. Let's start small and then we'll go from there. Back then, I think I realized early on that FBA was the only way to go. He was doing a lot of FBM at the time. And I was like, John, we got to send this into the warehouse, man. Like, A, we're limited on space. B, it doesn't make any sense to carry this stuff. And then C, it doesn't make any sense for you to be packaging and shipping this out every day. You're saving pennies for everything that we're shipping out. And also at that point, like in order to get the Prime badge, which I knew was going to be huge because me as a consumer, I was using it all the time. I was like, we need to get the Prime badge. So we have to start running this via FBA. And so we lucked into this niche, found it. I don't even think we used like Jungle Scout. Jungle Scout was around then. Like we were using it to like kind of scope things out. But this was just what I used to do. Was I called it spelunking. So I would find a niche, and then I'd go 2 or 3 products deeper. So I'd look at a product. I would look at the parent ASIN that was selling a lot of money, and I'd go, okay, well, what can I sell that's complementary to this? And we're talking, products that are moving, probably 10, 30,000 a day. And I'd go, okay, what's a product that moves well with this? And then I'd look at what are some complementary products for that product, and then what are some complementary products for that product. So it was almost like rappelling down the browse node to finding something that wasn't quite that volume, but just enough to make it worth my time. And so we jumped on this. When we started in this category, there wasn't even a browse node for this product. It didn't even exist. So it was basically just health and personal care. And then we listed it under other. And then through our sales activity, through expanding the brands, through expanding the product lines, it actually developed. And then we actually got our own browse node, which I took that as success. I was like, obviously we're doing something right. Amazon has, kind of built this little subcategory for us. So That was kind of the indication. Yeah, I mean, to start from, hey, there's not really a browse node here, then to have it kind of evolve. I mean, it's kind of obviously like the demand is there, but then also, people don't. It's kind of like what came first, the chicken or the egg. Like if product wasn't there, would people have been searching for it? But if people hadn't been searching for it, would the product be there? Kind of thing. That's kind of how it took off. And John, we both kind of started in this niche, and then John went another avenue with his products, and then I stayed the course on this, and then just continually improved with size quantities, variations, package quantities, different material types.
So Joe, how does this business primarily make money?
So, I mean, obviously, for the uninitiated, like I can kind of explain this a little bit more. Like we make money by sourcing products from a variety of global markets, and especially for this one, it was a heavily US-based sourcing adventure. So we develop packaging, pricing models, and then we ship it all into FBA, where it's the world's largest fulfillment operations, and it just takes and ships our products all over the world to consumers. For the initiated that are listening to this, that are obviously looking to buy, our primary business model is simply FBA. I thought it was a no-brainer, to jump on the FBA bandwagon early, to get solidified there, especially with options with subscribe and save. Given the nature of the product, this is a consumable product, which is kind of a rarity as well. I just saw a huge opportunity on that end. So, I mean, realistically, it's just putting the things up on FBA Marketplace and then leveraging returning customers and then trying to increase that retention to keep people coming back.
And earlier you were saying, because you're right, 10 years ago, everyone was on the drop shipping train. That was a big thing. So why did you choose FBA over drop shipping?
So, I mean, for me, it was a no-brainer. To be able to make money while you sleep with a minimal operation was like too good to be true. I got to see what was required of an FBM operation. You got to have people there. You got to have all the infrastructure to print off the labels. You have to make sure that you have people that you can trust to put the right product in the right package. And I mean, for me, it was a completely different ball game. I mean, for the first time in the history of the world, do we have like 24-hour, interconnectivity? People are buying every single hour of every single day. If I look at my sales history, I'm getting orders from 12 o'clock in the morning to 11:59 p.m. It was crazy to me, to think that was a possibility, to make money while you're sleeping, to make money while I'm sitting here watching a show. And for me, I was like, okay, this is the only way to do this. Yes, you could do FBM, you could get a warehouse, you could get a space. But, in terms of like, for me, I only have one guy. So it's me and one other guy, and he's been with me pretty much like the last 4 years. So in order to get a really efficient operation, and I didn't want to have to deal with the headache of having a bunch of employees and having a bunch of things going on, it just made the most sense. And I can travel, like that was the other big part of this, is that I don't have to be in one central location. I can travel the globe while running the business. And that seemed insane to me, and I think that's the biggest draw was, wait a minute, you mean to tell me that I can still make the same money that I would make working for somebody else, but I can fly around the globe, source products, see the world, and still make a living? It was a no-brainer, basically. So,
yeah, it's one of the best things about working with online businesses, especially when they really take off and become successful, is it just seems like it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten to see, like, being obviously from a rural area in Michigan, I never really thought about traveling the world. My dad was in the military, so he traveled a lot, like when he was in the military, and I always like dreamed about doing that, but I never saw the opportunity. I was always like, okay, I can go and see these places, as a vacation or something. I've lived in China for a month. I lived in China in Yiwu for a month, like sourcing products. I've lived in India for 2 weeks. I've gone to Singapore. I've gone to a lot of these countries that I would never have any reason to do so. I mean, I've been to Mexico and I've started sourcing products here as well. I've just traveled the entire globe, through the usefulness of this business. So, I mean, it's paid more than its dividend to me, in the long and short of it. Like, I have gotten way more value from this business than I think I've given to the business, in terms of like, personal enrichment.
That's fantastic. So why did you choose this niche in particular? I know you kind of talked a bit about your process to find products to sell, but what drew you to this niche?
So for us, I mean, we kind of lucked into it, like rather I did. I was friends with a guy who needed a companion for the journey, right? And so he knew that he needed to find somebody who had the common sense to look at something in the unrelenting ability, to figure things out. That's what I love to do. I love solving problems, and he knows that I love solving problems. So he was like, all right, I need this guy with me. So when we were looking at this stuff, like, I'm not going to take any credit for finding this. He kind of handed it to me, and then I grew it into what it is. But how we search for those products is that we look for the unsexy products, which is kind of counterintuitive to what everybody else tells you. Like, I want to find an underserved market, and I want to put together a decent brand, and I want to launch that brand, and then I want to serve that clientele. I don't need it to be sexy yoga mats. I mean, sexy as in like, ooh, this is such a, this sells, 100K a month. Oh my God, this sells 100K a week or whatever the numbers are. I'm looking for something that's very simple, and our business model has always been find things that aren't sexy, but sell consistently. And so like this was something that was relatively sheltered. There was only one other major player in the space. What's funny enough, they were actually based out of Michigan. So they were based out of Detroit. And so we kind of like did a little research on them and looked them up. They were like a wholesaler that kind of like had expanded to that. And so we saw an opportunity to kind of like come in and disrupt because he wasn't doing any sort of prime activity. So he came in, started doing the prime, and I think he stayed the course with the FBM model, obviously because he has staff and, like there's some tangibility there with, making sure that your people still have a job. So, but I mean, that was kind of our kind of like guerrilla warfare in that regard to come in and say, okay, now we're going to offer this. And then we also expanded the product offering like tenfold, like different sizes, different package quantities. And so, I mean, and the fact that it was consumable really was attractive to me. If I could sell sporting equipment, yeah, my average return consumer, is every 2 years or every year or every couple of years, depending on what you're selling. For my consumable business, my average customer is returning 30 to 45 days. So I did the math very early on to say, oh, I really like this niche. Even if it was highly competitive, I would still go into it just from the consumable nature of it. All those factors kind of played into why we chose it.
Yeah, I remember seeing that, because you're part of Subscribe and Save, that's a big factor in your business is just the consumable nature of the products, which is a great potential growth opportunity for a future buyer.
Right. I mean, like the ability to get somebody in the door. I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? Is as long as the product is good and they don't have a negative experience with your product, which, I mean, rarely, like FBA comes with its own set of challenges, right? Sometimes they ship out the wrong product. Sometimes people return products that aren't exactly, in the condition that I sent them in. But I mean, to get somebody in the door, they just keep coming back. And all it is, it's something as easy as incentivizing it with an increase in a discount. So instead of offering a 5% discount on Subscribe and Save, I offer 10%. But then once they're in the door, I'm okay with giving them that 10% because then I don't have to continuously try to gain that clientele again. Once I have somebody loyal, it's built in. I mean, it was a no-brainer for me. As soon as Subscribe and Save really like started to come out, I was like, oh man, I need to get in on this. And then, from the small and light perspective, I never even broke into the small and light side of it because I didn't want to lose the Prime badge. The Prime badge was so important for me to be able to have my products available in some markets the same day. In some markets, it's 2 days. But that was huge. I knew the convenience was everything, right? Especially in this growing economy, because I'm looking at it from a consumer and also from a business perspective. People want ease of use. So if I don't have to think about it, and if it just shows up on my doorstep, it's like opening a Christmas package every day. I mean, that was the beauty of Amazon for me, and that's kind of why I doubled down on that. So
with all of the work that you've put into building this business to where it's at today, why have you decided to sell it now?
There's a variety of reasons. Like, firstly, I want to build a family. I'm kind of at the end of like being a nomad. I've seen a lot of the things that I wanted to see in the world. The rest of it, I kind of want to see with kids. Like I want to share these experiences with kids. I want to put down some roots. I want to start a family. I'm turning 35 in January, and I kind of want the kids in the white picket fence now. Like before, I wanted the adventure. I wanted the freedom that this type of business provided. And yeah, I know that I could still run this business with the family and kids, but I honestly, like I grew up in a household where both parents worked. And for me, this would provide me an opportunity to kind of be like the stay-at-home dad. I could consult on the side, do some other odd jobs or something, but that's kind of like the first reason is family. Second reason would be boredom. Don't take that in the bad way.
No.
Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. Don't take that the bad way. I've had so many jobs where once I master it, I just lose interest in it, right? Like I always want to solve another problem. Like I'm always looking for problems to solve. And working at other companies, I was always a firefighter. We always identified ourselves as firefighters because you get in the morning and you come in and you go, okay, what the hell's on fire? What am I putting out today? All right. And so after enough years of that, you get tired of that. And you're like, man, I'm so tired of putting out fires all the time. And so if I ever have the opportunity to run my own business, I'm going to make sure there's never another fire to fight. And so over the years, I've developed a system to automate and to make it kind of like I don't have to think. Like I built a system from scratch using Google Sheets that keeps track of all my inventory, lets me know when I need to reorder. It does like a good like 95% of the thinking for me, but that also kind of like dulls it down a little bit, right? Like I get up in the morning and I find it that I'm doing like a job, and I don't want to hand this off to somebody else and go, okay, you do this job and I'm going to manage it. Like it's hard for me to step away from that. Like the boredom side of it is like, I'm not learning anything more, right? I've kind of like got my arms around this. And so I want to find something a little bit more engaging, like solving problems, taking on challenges, and making things efficient for other people.
This actually is a common reason that we hear a lot from people who have built up really successful businesses is that they like the challenge of creating a brand and creating something from scratch. And then once that's done, they feel like, yeah, I can identify growth opportunities for this, but I don't want to be the one to scale it. I want to move on to the next thing because, like you said, it's boredom,
No, exactly. Like I can market. I'm a marketer, but I don't love that side of the business. The side of the business I love is seeing inefficiencies, developing systems, putting this stuff together, figuring out putting together the puzzle pieces, right? I love putting together the outside edge of a puzzle. I could care less about the nitty gritty of fleshing that out or growing that piece. I love the excitement of setting up the bounds of the project and going, okay, I now have the edges, I now have the borders, and then now whatever I do within that is cool and all, but I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe it's something weird with my head, but that's the thing. So, I mean, there are a lot of growth opportunities in this. And like I said, I can market, I am a marketer, but I don't enjoy that side of the business at all. So it's I know I've gotten this, I've probably built the most efficient system that I can using the tool sets that I have. If I had a developer, I could probably, really dig into this and, kind of create the software that you see, the Brandon Young's, or I think it's Brendan Morris. I think he has a really good software built up as well. But, I could probably do that. But it's for what I have, I don't really need to keep going. And then the other flip side of that coin is that I have real estate as well that seems to be taking up more and more of my time. And I really enjoy the learning and the kind of doing aspect because I was doing a lot of the maintenance myself. I was remodeling a kitchen, doing drywall, learning those types of hands-on tasks. I really enjoy that stuff. And so that's kind of something that seems to be calling to me more. Also being the guy that, somebody calls when something is on fire, I kind of miss being a firefighter, in a way, it's a weird situation. When you're in it, all you want to do is not have to deal with everybody else's garbage on a daily basis or somebody's inability to do their job or whatever. But, I miss getting those firefighter calls where it's hey, this is a problem. Oh my God, we're on fire. We need to do that. And then also my other friends have all gotten out. So I was the guy that they would call hey, man, I need help to figure this out. John would call me and be like, dude, something happened. We need to figure this out. XYZ, this is what's going on. And I'd put on my firefighter cap and I'd spend, 4 hours of my day working on that. And now that he's out, he's spending more time with his kids. And I see that and it's man, I really need to get my priorities straight. I kind of want to get this, figured out. So
that is completely understandable. I totally get that. So, being at the forefront of all of this, I am sure that there is so much that you've learned that you could apply to future businesses that you have, probably even real estate, just time management, getting processes in order. But is there something in particular that you learned from building this business that worked that maybe surprised you by how efficient it was or the results that you got? Is there a standout?
So for me, I'll give you a little bit of information. This is going to be kind of a holistic answer. So for me, I realized early on, I started hiring a bunch of people to try to take over a job. But the reality was that I didn't have any of the systems in place to give to those people. So I was setting them up for failure. So I learned early on, don't hire people to throw at a problem. Take time to plan things out thoroughly and eliminate any of the waste or any of the inefficiency. But, the other part of that is to be efficient. So I'm a perfectionist, right? So that was the other pitfall of this was I'm a perfectionist. And as a perfectionist, we tend to procrastinate. So I think it's Whitney Cummings, comedian. It says, perfectionism leads to procrastination, which leads to paralysis. So the biggest thing is don't try to be such a perfectionist that it leads to your paralysis. Sometimes good enough has to suffice, especially in this fast moving market of online, of e-commerce. You've got to be first and then you can kind of make it better as you go. So that was one thing that I learned, early on was that it doesn't need to be perfect. Get it up and then iterate. That is the beauty of this is that what is today could be completely different tomorrow. And then what is tomorrow could be completely different the next day. So it's not like you've painted a painting and you have to scrape all the paint back off of this canvas. It's completely be wiped out and then start over fresh tomorrow. So there's a lot of goodness in just going and figuring it out along the way. The other thing is, the thing that just worked for me was I never realized this, when you're a consumer, you don't look at products that way. But when you go to these markets, when you start selling your own product, you start to look at it from a dual perspective. What would I want as a customer? And then what do I need as a businessman? So I looked at that and it was if you have a good product that people want and need, and it's a reasonable price, and there's a fast way to get it to them, they'll buy it. that was one thing I was like, oh man, I've got to have this brand and I've got to like put together all these assets and all this other stuff. And meanwhile, my buddy John is just like blowing me out of the water because he's just pumping out more products. It may not be the prettiest brand. It may not be the fanciest artwork and all this stuff, because I really enjoyed that aspect of it, like developing a brand, coming up with the brand name, coming up with, like the color schemes and all this stuff. But I got lost in the weeds. At the end of the day, like in order to make money, you've got to have a product that sells. So start there and then worry about that stuff after you get enough of a solid base. So I never really watched my competition or tried to copy them. I started to adopt John's philosophy of, I'm just going to launch a product, make sure that it's something that people need, make sure that it's good quality, make sure the price is reasonable, make sure I can get it to them fast, and I'm going to win. Sometimes that went really well. And then other times, like the old saying is like, if you're a trailblazer, you end up with arrows in your back. Because the people that are coming behind you, that will usurp you. Sometimes that happens, but then other times, it doesn't. So I've been fortunate. I didn't get too many arrows in my back, like when we were kind of like making this work.
And if I remember correctly, your top selling SKU is the number one bestseller in its category.
Yeah, it just kind of happened. Like, to be honest, I kind of kept my nose to the grindstone. I didn't really pay attention to what anybody else was doing. Like around a couple of years ago, it really started getting like fiercely competitive. A lot of sellers from mainland China were coming in. And as we've seen about a dozen or so other categories, they would try to really kind of race to the bottom, because that's the common denominator, right? It's price. So they would try to race to the bottom, and I didn't lower my prices. I didn't even pay attention. It was just like, look, I'm not going to try to bargain basement this stuff. And I think in a lot of ways that helped me, because not appearing as the cheapest thing on the block doesn't always go the opposite direction. You don't always lose your throne by not being the cheapest. So that was one thing that I didn't participate in. I didn't really mess around. There was a lot of flux in this category a couple of years ago when all that happened. And I just stayed the course. I stayed true to what the brand was. I stayed true to the product offering. We sell made in the USA products on one side of the brand, and the other side of the brand, it's primarily based out of India. And yeah, I mean, the results speak for themselves. You know what I mean? Like, I guess that's the thing, is I kept my nose clean. I didn't do any of the shady kind of gray market stuff. Like, I've never done any of the review cultivating or any of that jazz. It was always just, here's the product. If you want it, great. If you don't, that's great too. There are plenty of other options. And, I kind of let the market decide,
Yeah, I think there's so much to be said for that. And that's something that we don't actually really cover very often. It's an interesting and it's an excellent point to bring up. I think when people start getting undercut, that they tend to go into a panic and they think, oh, I've got to slash my prices. I've had this conversation with my husband, when he started his business, which is not online, but I said to him the same thing, that you don't always want to be the cheapest, because cheap implies not great quality a lot of the time.
Low quality. Exactly.
Yeah. And so I think it's a bit off-putting for people. You're not going to be attracting the clients that you want.
Right.
You might run into more customer service problems, especially if you're kind of rushing a inferior product to market.
Exactly. To your point, right? Like, from the perspective of pricing, I found that there was a certain price point that I got rid of all of my problem clientele, right? Because if somebody's going to message you for a $5.99 product, you don't want that customer. I got to be honest. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if somebody's going to take the time out of their day, if they don't value their time enough to message you about a $5.99 product, don't sell that at $5.99. You know what I mean? Like, I honestly, I went from getting, 20 to 30 messages a day. At some point, I think this was a couple of years ago when all this flux was happening in the category, we had a very stiff competition come in. They were bottoming out the price points and all this stuff. This kind of ties into, my ideas about what doesn't work, right? So trying to compete on price does a couple of different things, right? The most common denominator in any product is going to be pricing. So they may have a comparable product. They may have the exact same product. And in a lot of these instances, most people have the exact same product. I'm fortunate where I have a US-based product, so it's very different, for better or for worse. But the common denominator is price. And at some point, someone will have the lowest available, and they won't be afraid to exploit it, right? I mean, if you're dealing with a factory from China, you can't compete. You just can't compete on price. Sorry, that's facts. So my focus was, don't race to the bottom and focus on customer service. And what I mean by that is, I purposely increased my price by $1, right? I saw what was going on, and I did the initial gut reaction that everybody else did. I was like, oh shit, okay, everybody's coming into the space, and this is the situation, and my price is, everybody's lowering their price by $2 or $3. I need to get my pricing in line with everybody else. And then I woke up one day and I was like, I'm going to increase my price by $1 across the board, and we'll see what happens. It was really kind of a turning point for me, because I'm dealing with a lot of customer service. I'm dealing with a lot of customers, that are messaging about a $5.99 product. And I remember laughing with John. I'm like, God, man, these folks literally don't value their time. I mean, at this point, just ask Amazon for the refund, but they want to like have a conversation. They want to send me a photograph of what was wrong with the product. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to double down on like product packaging just to make sure it's as clean as possible, make sure that everything's dialed in, and then I'm going to increase my price by $1. And it was hilarious. Within like 2 months, I didn't get any more messages from customers.
Wow.
On the flip side of that, like maybe that's like me skewing it, but on the flip side of that, I also put on there that, like there's a 100% satisfaction guarantee. It's a lower priced item. So as it's a lower priced item, it wasn't worth the headache for me to have it be shipped back to Amazon, have Amazon send it to me. Like I just started like refunding people, and I started giving away more than what they paid for. But again, for me, for something, like for less than $10, I'd rather keep that customer forever. And if I return the money to them that they spent and I gave them another product on top of that, it's a win all day. I've never had a situation where I gave somebody what they paid for and I gave them the opportunity to buy it from me again. Did I ever have anybody go, I'm still upset at you? In the 6 years that I've done this, that never happens. I mean, customer service is king. Product packaging, like for me, I never really got lavish or fancy. It was just simple. It's something simple, and the product quality, all of those things is what really kind of like helped me. Key differentiation is what sets you apart from the pack. And you just need to find out what makes your brand special and then double down on that. And then I almost never adjust unless it's the last resort and I'm just way outside of the bounds of like what's acceptable for the marketplace. So,
well, speaking of your customers, where does the majority of your traffic come from?
100% of my traffic comes from FBA, or it comes from the Amazon Marketplace. So 100% of my traffic comes from the Amazon Marketplace. I did some initial video offerings with another company just for really like some content on the platform. And it did really well, but I don't drive any outside traffic. Unfortunately, for this product, for this niche, Google Ads is out, Facebook advertising is out. A lot of the normal advertising channels are out. I mean, and even to a certain extent, most of Amazon's internal advertising is also out. So like a lot of our traffic just comes from organic search traffic.
All right. So yeah, with all of the popular advertising methods being out, there's not really much that you're doing in terms of marketing right now.
No, I mean, and realistically, like Amazon traffic already has an intent to buy. So I've done consulting for Shopify clients. I've done consulting, we have to take a broad audience, kind of funnel it down, warm that audience up, and then eventually ask for the buy, like where you have like your targeted sales funnels. With Amazon, everybody's coming in here with an intent to buy. Everybody's got money burning a hole in their pocket. Anytime that they open that Amazon app, it's not just to browse, it's to shop. They are clicking through. So for me, it didn't make a lot of sense to try to reinvent the wheel when I already have constant traffic for people that are looking to buy this product. For me, I think that there are opportunities for specific markets related to this niche would do phenomenal. But the biggest thing that I would take away from this is that there is still a huge market of folks out there that still go to their local smoke shop. They don't know that these accessories, that these things are available online. And the biggest thing was that during the pandemic, I saw a very large uptick in new to brand customers because people couldn't go to the smoke shop. That's not an essential service. During COVID, like this was kind of like the awakening of this particular niche, for people to go, wait a minute, I can just buy this stuff from Amazon and get it shipped directly to my house. I don't have to go down to the local spot. Done. And so that was a huge part of it as well that I think we've seen. And especially with the subscription model added onto that, I think that more and more of that traffic is going to start coming organically. I mean, like if you search for specific traffic, I don't want to talk specific keywords here, but if you search for specific traffic for related niches, there isn't an actual category for any of this product. And we're talking search volume in, like the 100K a month area. So like, we're not talking like small potatoes. We're talking like something that has like substantial growth opportunity with no support from Amazon, with no category, with no real fundamental like foundation for those. So,
well, speaking of growth opportunities, if you were to keep the business, what are some ways that you would try to grow it?
I would use micro influencers. That's a huge thing that I just noticed, like in a general trend. I think this has kind of like been the secret sauce in MDS for a while, but what you're doing is you're reaching out to influencers that are under 20K, that have like a small following, and it generally tends to be a more organic presence. It generally tends to be people that are more like in touch with their audience as opposed to like these huge mega influencers that charge, $1 million for a shout out or something like that. And you try to grow it that way. I need to add a little disclaimer here because it's kind of important to differentiate here because it's legal reasons. We only sell tobacco accessories, and they are only intended for that use. They're solely intended for tobacco use. So with that being said, with that out of the way, there are a lot of opportunities out there that are in the market today. Micro influencers are a new trend that's starting to come up. We're talking like people with under 20K followers. Those people have a direct connection with their audience. And if you were able to get it in the hands of the right micro-influencer, I think you're going to see a lot of positive growth potential. Not only that, but also opportunity in terms of targeted product launches and having an established community that can support your brand. Like that is huge. As we've seen with Facebook, with them dialing back a lot of the targeting availability, as we've seen a lot of these other advertisers that don't really have that option, this niche is very unique where I don't have access to a lot of those tools, but I'm still growing. Now it's just a matter of finding tools that align with the brand's, natural tendencies. So there are other categories within smoking as a whole. There are companies that specialize in partnering with those brands, such as Herb, Leafly, and other smoking-friendly advertising. So there are a lot of opportunities there to develop content to educate the consumer and simultaneously promote the product. You have to be a little careful when you're working with some of these sites because they tend to focus solely on cannabis, and your policy is that you only sell tobacco accessories. But I've had a lot of success with getting sponsored content from these companies, content that I paid for from these companies onto Amazon, as long as there's no mention of cannabis, as long as there's no allusion to cannabis or any other cannabis-related words or vocabulary. So that was always a big sticking point for me. But that doesn't mean that you can't leverage that. That's a big part of it is use what you can and don't dwell on what you can't. So, that's a huge opportunity there. And I think that with the current political landscape, I don't think it's a matter of if cannabis legalization happens nationwide. Because in some market, this is already happening, right? There are plenty of states out there, even my home state of Michigan, has gone the legalization route. I don't think it's a matter of if, I think it's a matter of when. The only real key standpoint is that they're not going to legislate that any differently than smoking, right? You cannot advertise, from a minor perspective, right? That's why when you go to these websites, you have to say, yes, I'm over 21 or whatever the age requirement is where you're from. But when you go to those websites, they have a lot of opportunity to get your product in front of people through those same sources that we don't normally have access to. And that would be something that I would jump on. On the other side of that, on a product side, I'm actually working on this right now, but doing sample packs. So without getting too specific into the details of the product, I have an opportunity to do sample packs and then offer a coupon to get people in the door. And so that's what we're focusing on right now is getting a bite-size piece of this consumable product in front of people. So that way they can try it out and see how it is. And then if they enjoy it, then also incentivize them buying into the next product, with a substantial discount, because generally once you get them in the door, they're going to stick around for longer. So that's something else that we've done. So, and then aside from that, there are other existing product lines with room for additional variations, package quantities, bundle packs, sample packs. All of this stuff is lined up, but it's just a matter of execution at this point.
So are there any other major opportunities for growth that we haven't covered yet that you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, there is a lot of opportunity for overlap with other smoking categories and also other categories in general. For this particular product, I've had people reach out to me from the home improvement sector. I've had people reach out to me from the manufacturing sector saying, hey, we love your product and we want to feature this in our product. How do we get a hold of this? So wholesale is a completely different conversation that we haven't even broached that market. This is primarily an FBA business, but there's a lot of opportunity on the wholesale front in terms of another business model if they already have experience with that. On the more in line with what is already existing, I would say that Canada is a huge growth market for obvious reasons. Canada has a huge smoking component there. The demographic is ever growing in that area, and it's a huge growth market. There are major growth opportunities for the category, particularly in territories where legalization has already taken place, such as Canada. Canada is a huge growth market. Legalization happened, I think it was last year. And I never really delved deeper into offering products that could be construed as a drug paraphernalia, quote unquote. But that is a huge growth market. And I think it's only a matter of time, before we see these politics change across the board, especially with hemp and CBD. I'm not ignorant to the opportunities there. It's just a matter of keeping in line what the disclaimer was earlier, that our products are only for tobacco use only. And to maintain that line, it's important to be aware of the potential positives, but also, maintain that until something changes in the laws, that this is the product that we're offering. And then from the perspective of a lot of these cannabis related products and a lot of this, this definitely has a correlation. This product can correlate to that specific product offering, and the traffic's there. You can see the search results with keyword volumes right now that has no category, no support, no advertising. And we're talking 100K a month. So if you look at some of these keyword search results, it's just a question of who can fill the demand without breaking any rules. So the need is there. And then aside from that, on the more traditional end, wholesale is another huge option that we never really delved into. I mean, we have the production, we have the supply. I just didn't have the network of, like traditional channels. And it kind of went counterintuitive to what the FBA business was as a whole. Like I didn't want to have to be on the ground. But for somebody who's already solidified and already has that opportunity there, like that's a huge side of the business that was never even explored just because it didn't align with like what my fundamental goals were for the business, which was to travel, not be stationary in one spot. So
now, Joe, one of the cool things about your business that you really wanted to highlight for buyers is that you have a supply chain that's very India and US centric. And you do have some Chinese suppliers, but they're dealing primarily with raw materials that are shipped very quickly and they're inexpensive to ship. So can you take us through the process that you normally use to get your inventory to Amazon?
yeah. So for me, like talking about the different suppliers, my US based suppliers ship generally within a week. So a lot of that is raw material. I get it. And then I have my 3PL and kitting company break it down into its constituent parts. And then we label, pack it, ship it all into Amazon, within a matter of days. We also have a standing inventory of those products right now. I think we're through May. So between what I have in Amazon FBA, between what I have at my 3PL, and then between what I have on hand for raw materials, I think we're good till May. Some instances June, but mostly April, May, or June. That's what I keep on hand. From the perspective of like my parts from India come in prepackaged, ready to go directly to Amazon, no issues there. It goes to the warehouse, and then the workflow is that we then just ship it into Amazon. That could be expedited. You could ship directly. I just never really delved into it. I like having the control. It's cheaper for me to not have a bunch of stuff sitting in Amazon's warehouse because I already have the 3PL there that maintains that for me. And then from the China side, we haven't really felt a lot of these pain points, especially with containers going up. I never really dealt with any sort of containers. We would do mixed freight sometimes where we would get, we'll have it go, like via the 2-week boat, and then it'll get shipped into the warehouse via UPS. I only have I think 2 product lines that are actually manufactured in China. And then there's only 2 other product lines that we actually use material from China to build. So that's kind of the long and short of the supply chain map, as it were. We're not solely reliant on China. I mean, I think the top 30 SKUs that we sell, I would say either US or India.
And what does an average day look like for you as far as working on this business goes?
Right now, I got to be honest, I'm kind of coasting. I'm about 4 to 5 hours a week, and most of that time is just coordinating shipments and talking with my 3PL for production runs and shipments that go out weekly. So that was not the picture. I mean, I'm not trying to sell anybody a false picture. Like that was not the picture 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was going through especially of course, it always comes in waves, right? Like at this point, we had a large influx of mainland Chinese sellers that were coming into the space on top of the exacerbated issues with me not having a clean system in place that I was still trying to put together. And probably within 3 or 4 months, I actually was able to get my arms around everything, get the system built. So, I mean, we're talking, 16-hour days, just trying to crush and get this stuff done. And finally, I started to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I had enough inventory built up. I didn't have to worry about the production side of it. So when I freed myself up from production management, I started to develop SOPs and build that out with my VA and get everything dialed in to the point where we have one living document that we run off of. And so that's why I'm coasting to 4 to 5 hours a week. I put in a lot of work a couple of years ago to get to the point where I am right now. But like I said, most of my time is just spent coordinating with the 3PL. The production runs, I put it into an order document, they build it, and then they move it into inventory automatically. And then right now, my team can do the shipments, but I like to manage my inventory a little bit closer because I know the business so well. So I look at it from the perspective of, okay, here's what the machine is telling me to do. Here's what I know I need to do. And so there's a little bit of a gap there, but it's not that much. So, I mean, right now, I think we're at a minimum. The lowest SKU that I have in terms of product in-house is going to be March 2022, which I'm already ordering some additional to make sure that we can carry through. But I got tired of going through the process over and over and over again of trying to do this just in time, because I picked that up from automotive, trying to do just in time delivery. And for me, without giving too much away, the product is beneficial in terms of size. I don't have a lot of size constraints. I don't need to have this huge warehouse facility. And it's just a very easy product to work with in terms of, shipping pretty much across the board. Packaging, shipping, it's all very simple. It's all very easy, and it's all very not cost prohibitive. I'll put it that way. So it makes more sense for me to sit on that inventory because it doesn't have a shelf life than trying to piece it out and have a lot of maintenance. So yeah, but right now I'm about 4 to 5 hours a week, and about an hour of that is, just coordinating with a 3PL at different points during the week. So we normally ship it on a Thursday. We do about one shipment a week if we need to. At this point, I don't need emergency ship anything anymore, other than like if I didn't catch something or if I was purposely letting something run out. We ship about once a week, and I've got at least like 5 shipments a month that's included in the service plan that I have with the 3PL. So, if I do have an overage or something like that, it's not that big of a deal to crank out an extra one. But yeah, we normally ship Thursdays. We generate the shipment manifest on a Monday or a Tuesday. By Thursday, it's already packaged, ready to go. And at that point, it's completely hands off for me. I don't follow up with the 3PL or any of that. They do it all. And I'm kind of at the best. It's a little bit bittersweet because I put in a lot of work to get to this point, and now it's the time that I'm looking at selling. So it's like, man, I really wish I could just like kind of enjoy this a little more, but at the same time, it doesn't align with my goals. So
no, I understand. That's what I was going to say is, you've put so much, you worked really long, hard hours in the beginning to build this up to where it's at right now. So what skills or requirements do you think there are for a buyer who's coming in, who might not be familiar with the niche or the business model?
This is something I really take to heart because I've seen a lot of these folks. I've seen a lot of like the aftermath of what happens. The thing that you need to understand about Amazon is that it's its own monster. Okay. I've seen what happens when people get complacent and you think you can just throw talent at something. They don't teach Amazon at Wharton. So you have to understand that everything related to this business affects the other components. If you don't have supply chain management, you can't sell products. You can't sell products, you can't rank. You can't rank, you lose. It's that simple. I've seen so many of these aggregators have difficulty and in some instances run businesses into the ground because the left hand, A, doesn't know what the right hand is doing, or that B, the right hand even exists. So I've seen situations where they're spending money on ads, but don't account for the increase in daily demand. So then the product runs out faster, but there was no plan to restock up. So they spent 25 grand on an ad revenue on a campaign to try to rank, but then they ran out of product for 4 weeks, which negates any of the benefit that they spent. It's absolutely critical to have a finger on the pulse of your business. So you need to anticipate demand and plan accordingly. Unfortunately for Amazon, and I think this is a bigger talking point for the entire industry, these silos generally don't work. The silos of a big traditional company where I only do A and then it's left to everybody else to do B, C, D, it doesn't always work. You need to have either a program manager or a project manager or an account manager that is there that knows all the different aspects because everything interferes with each other. If you don't have the stock, you can't rank. It is honestly just that simple, folks.
So what do you think are the biggest risks with this business that a buyer should be aware of?
The biggest risk is that Amazon is a constantly changing marketplace. I think everybody's seen over the last year, for anybody who's initiated into the marketplace, you get to see what happens when machine learning runs amok. And you get to see what happens when policies change. Especially in light of the recent information where search find buys are now faux pas and you can't do that. And, manipulation of marketplace ranking and all this stuff comes out. That's always been the case. In Amazon's eyes, that's all black hat. Everybody's like, oh, well, that's like a gray hat technique. No, in Amazon's eyes, it's all black hat because you're still technically manipulating marketplace. If you read the TOS, that's marketplace manipulation. Fortunately, for me, I've never done any of that activity. I've never really prioritized that type of, funnel buys or search find buys or any of that stuff. Played a really clean game because I was always in this zone of hypervigilance. Again, I sell tobacco accessories. I don't sell anything else. And, it tends to be, kind of makes me a little bit over paranoid, but I think it's beneficial because I've always played the clean game. But ranking is constantly changing. It's affected by algorithm tweaks. You're dealing with a marketplace that is inherently volatile. And as time goes on, it's going to continue to be volatile. I'm not saying anything that I don't think anybody would agree with that's in the space right now. For me, as a hedge, I would also develop a separate online presence and start cultivating customer lists as well, because as we've all known, the customers on Amazon are Amazon's customers. They're not your customers. So just having another online presence, to start to cultivate a customer list so that when you have product launches, you can actually kind of cross-pollinate. If you launch a product on the website, simultaneously you launch on Amazon. And if you have an existing customer list, I think it would only serve somebody to build a separate website and have that kind of fleshed out. And also on that end, cultivating those customer lists, if done in the right way and if done with the appropriate permissions, can be very lucrative as well, because this clientele, this particular niche, is only going to become more valuable for other companies that are looking to gain access to that customer base as well. So whether it be through partnerships, whether it be through sponsorships, like you could essentially build your own little side advertising business if you really wanted to. The only other risk is competition, but realistically competition, there's always the risk of some big mega competitor coming in and trying to, bottom out the category. The benefit is this already happened a couple of years ago. There's already a huge swath of Chinese competitors that primarily deal directly with the factories that are in the category. And the difference is that we offer very different products. So, we're well established in the brand. We're well positioned to weather pretty much any storm at this point. The worst has already come to pass in the niche. Like I know that there were some niches, where people were making a lot of money and then the margins started to drain away as more and more competition came into the space. Fortunately, we've been able to hold our ground on our end. So I would say that those are the biggest risks. Amazon is a constantly changing marketplace. And, competition is always a risk. But I think if you stay the course, if you keep offering great product, to the consumer at a reasonable price, right now, I don't face a lot of the same problems that many other businesses do in terms of, increasing costs for shipping. My business model just wasn't based on container loads due to the size of the product. So I think those are the biggest risks for anybody in the space right now. But particularly for mine, I would say that, Amazon is its biggest risk to Amazon, put it that way.
And so for a potential buyer, would you commit to a non-compete?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, that would be, a non-compete for selling the same products or adjacent products. I wouldn't get into the smoking accessories category at all. I would still have an interest in selling, just in a completely different space and obviously consulting, but I wouldn't do any consulting that was in direct conflict with the buyer. So
how much support are you offering buyers?
For the right buyer, I'll be available for calls or quick emails for a few months. I know that this transition period is absolutely critical. So I want to make sure that it goes as smoothly as possible. And honestly, I'm willing to run the business hand in hand with them for like 2 to 4 weeks. If it was me, I'd find a point person. I'll help them develop SOPs or whatever they want to do. So that way we can pass the bus test. Bus test is if somebody got hit by a bus tomorrow, would the business still survive? And a lot of times, I understand, this intrinsic knowledge is not beneficial for a larger company. And so I'm willing to, kind of help facilitate that as best I can, because I don't want you guys to put somebody in charge and they get another job offer and then they're gone next week. I want to make sure that we develop a system that this is how it works. This is how it's always going to work. Yeah, there might be some tweaks here or there, but that's the biggest part is it's very crucial to make sure that the production doesn't fall off and to make sure that we understand demand. And I think my forecasting sheet and the program that I built will help us really understand, at least on a fundamental level, what needs to be ordered and what needs to be shipped in and when. And that's 80% of the business. The rest of it is the marketing and the trying to drive growth and all that other stuff. The biggest part of it is just making sure that you keep the stock in place. Unfortunately, a lot of that really doesn't even have anything to do with the buyer. It's going to be more on the 3PL and kitting side. But again, I want to be there to facilitate it. The one caveat that I will say is that if it's the typical situation where a buyer thinks that they know the business better than me after a week, I would want to revert to a standard agreement of 20 hours phone or email support, and then I'm out. My point is that I would want the buyer to use the information available. I've seen firsthand the horror stories of companies that think that they know what they are doing and they drive a multiple $1 million business into the ground within a month. I'm not saying that you guys don't know what you're doing. It's just a matter of let's be respectful of the fact that I've ran the business for 6 years, and I will be respectful of the fact that this is now your business to run with and do so as you see fit. I just think it's important to get that out of the way on the front end and just say, look, I will probably be one of the best partners that you've ever had, so long as the respect is mutual and so long as we work together.
And are you open to negotiating something like an earnout?
For the right buyer, yes, but it would need to make sense. And again, like I just stated, it's all about the mutual respect and acting in good faith. I'll never not hear a reasonable offer. The biggest thing is just making sure that I'm confident in the buyer's ability to maintain the business. At the end of the day, I'm trying to get out. So, the idea isn't to stay on as a partner. I'm not trying to look for a partner, but, like I said, if it makes sense, then absolutely, I'm all ears.
And just before we wrap up, what advice would you give to our listeners that you wish you knew when you got started?
I read this quote, I think a couple of years ago, and it really resonated with me. And it said, do you know when the best time to start something is? Yesterday. You know when the second best time to start something? Now. I used to be, I'm not that person anymore, but I used to be somebody who hesitated a lot, somebody who overthought things. What I can tell you is don't wait, just move. You'll figure it out along the way. And, you'll trip and you'll fall and you'll pick yourself back up, and that's okay. And I know it sounds groan worthy, and I know it's oh my God, eye roll, whatever, dude, tell me your sob story. But honestly, failure is your best friend. I was always so scared to fail that I didn't even try. And that's not what failure is. Failure is your best friend, and you need to embrace it like one. That's what I would say.
So putting yourself in the shoes of a buyer, why do you think this is a business worth buying?
Numbers wise, it makes sense, but any buyer isn't looking to do the same numbers. They're looking for growth opportunities. So to take 10 and make it 100, you make the investment for what it could become, not what it's doing now. And I think anyone that looks at this business should see the huge opportunity that is on the horizon. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I mean, that's a big part of this, right? It's not just buying the business that it's doing today, which does quite well for itself. It's buying the potential growth opportunities and the extensions into other markets and the extensions into other business models as well. So, I mean, for me, that's a no-brainer.
Well, I really feel like we've gotten an excellent look at what your business has to offer and you as the seller as well. So I feel like this has been a really, really valuable interview. So I'd really like to thank you so much for your time today, Joe. It's been a pleasure to learn about you and your business.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. To learn more and see if this listing has already been sold, head over to empireflippers.com/marketplace and search for listing 57427. If you're watching this on YouTube, click the link in the description to go straight to the listing. Once you've unlocked this listing, you'll be given everything you need to know about this business. So until next time, enjoy your digital journey.